Yeah, we can remove them. Right now they're all connected 111 and 112. I haven't connected anything.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so we have recruited. I guess we can just move to roadmap presentations, right?
Yeah, before that, we wanted to ask the release managers for 112, the general information.
Yeah, so I think it was discussed a little bit elsewhere, but the idea is we're going to try and line up release managers several releases in advance, just to make sure that there's kind of a little bit longer term planning for that, and folks can plan for resources around it. I think there was a sheet actually that we were starting. We actually took this up in steering, to try and get some balance among the vendors. If I dig that up.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have one lined up from Google, and we're looking for one or two more. So if people are interested, then please put a comment here and nominate yourself. Okay. Okay. Who is up for a roadmap presentation?
Networking.
I can stop presenting, or I can. You want me to click the link?
Sure.
Okay. There you
go. Are you going to share the?
Oh, it's not presenting.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not presenting. Good.
It's still on the TOC notes. I can just share.
I see the networking roadmap.
Maybe I just have a frozen screen then. I'll just read from my own tab then.
Can anyone else see the networking roadmap?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, looks good.
For the most part, items on here are just moving existing features forward and feature quality, so Delta to Alpha. The only API that we want to promote is workload group. We decided that virtual service, we should really prefer the Kubernetes APIs for that. for destination rule, we want to try to align better with the gateway, like the Kubernetes Gateway API. And then service entry and workload entry don't really have anything holding them back, but stable's a big step, so we want to put more discussion into that. Proxyless gRPC was just added support in pilot for 1.11, so I want to try to get that to alpha quality in this release. Jacob and Niraj want to get IPv6 to experimental support. DNS proxy, we really just want to promote that to beta for the most part. It's going to be just enhancing tests, especially around like multi-cluster, multi-network, and stateful set edge cases. It's a little rough around the edges there now. I'm not really sure what the too many specific items are for Gateway API in 1.12, but we're going to continue getting better support there. A small thing is making it so for Kubernetes 1.21, we start using endpoint slice mode by default in pilot instead of reading endpoints. I'm not really sure if Chen's on the call. I'm not really sure what the steps are for BTS or HBone, but I'm sure that we want to move that at least a few steps forward. Zonghu is going to implement his proposed API for topology aware load balancing. And finally, we have a PR already out to add some HTTP3 support on gateways. And then for lower priority items that we may or may not have time to implement, I want to try to support hostname-based load balancer resources to help AWS users, especially with using multi-network. We want to investigate eBPF as a capture mechanism, but I'm not really sure what goes into that, or we don't really have an owner for who's going to investigate that. And then LEDS support and VHDS support, we can implement the APIs, but a lot of the actual benefits from them would rely on some of what we have to do for Delta XDS already. So I'm not really sure if we'll actually add the APIs or not now. We probably will, since it should be somewhat low effort, but they probably won't actually provide real benefit yet. And that's pretty much it.
So, on the topic of IPv6, is there a reason you want to go with experimental instead of alpha?
Niraj or Jacob, if you're on.
Yeah, so in order to get this done, for one, you have to have endpoint slices. It's only kind of in later versions. This is for dual stack. It went, yeah, like the amount of testing required in order to get this done, and kind of it's more for not many people probably are kind of using this right now, and some of the code changes required for this are I would say there's going to be issues, right? Like even with the amount of testing that I'm trying to do right now, we keep kind of finding subtle bugs. So I think that's why we're kind of opting for this experimental mode right now.
So I think the big difference between alpha and experimental is that experimental is looking for more feedback on the direction you should go in. The reason I asked is because IPv6 is alpha right now, and this would mean that we'd have one IPv6 feature that was alpha and one that was experimental. I don't know if that would create confusion or anything, but that was my thought line.
I think that still makes sense to me. I mean, I understand IPv6 is alpha, but dual stack in itself is a big, complicated, heavy beast. Now, if at the end of the testing, it seems like we have reasonable quality, we can make it alpha. That's not a problem. It's just, I think, like Jacob said, it's better to start with a reasonable expectation based on what we are seeing.
Okay.
Are you moving ahead? Okay, that's what I was thinking. What's going on? It's Louis. Well, let me take over until he's back. Does anyone have any questions on the networking working group roadmap items for 112? Concerns? Right. Hey Sven, do you mind sharing? It will take me some time to get this all set up correctly. I don't have extra monitor close to me.
I think Louis was sharing earlier. Do you want me to?
I think Louis is having, network issues. That's what he's saying. So
Okay.
he dropped
What do you
off.
want me to share?
Just, start with the network. Start with the TOC agenda. Unless somebody has questions for the networking working group.
I'll pull it up now. Give me 1 second.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, I see it. Perfect. Thank you. So
Yeah, let me
I
get
just
that.
have one.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you. So I just have one question, Stephen, for the networking roadmap. So BTS, Hbone, do you have any more updates? I guess you were seeing if Yuchen is on the call, right?
Yeah, Yuchen pinged me. He told me he's gonna add stuff to the stock.
Okay. All right. I don't have anything else, so we should move on to the next working group, unless other TOC members have concerns or questions. All of this makes sense to me. It's promotions and stabilizing our networking core APIs and features.
Yeah, this all looks like good stuff.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Stephen. Let's move on then. Who's next? PNT. Extensions working group. We got to call them by the new names. Is anyone here to present?
Andor said they need an extra week, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
That,
yeah, let's copy to the next week's agenda then. All right, well, Sven does that. Jacob, you here?
Yes, I am. All right.
All right. Hang on a minute. Let me just make sure Sven types it so that we don't miss our notes. Finish his typing.
So on a note for Jacob's thing real quick, that's actually already merged as of Friday. So it's already promoted, but we might want to revisit.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth revisiting. Does it take just one approver? Because I know I approved it to merge it.
I think so. Let me double check, but I'm pretty sure I saw that merged.
All right, so we should probably change that if that's becomes an issue. So Jacob, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So gateway topology has been around now in Istio since 1.6. I believe in 1.10 we promoted it from experimental to alpha based on feedback from the TOC. So currently we are wondering what is the path forward basically for this feature. How can we get it from alpha to beta? For instance, this lives currently in mesh config and
It's in proxy config, just to make
Oh,
sure we're clear.
sure. Sorry, it's in ProxyConfig, and so I know that there are ongoing initiatives for the mesh config CRD as well as the ProxyConfig CRD, but there were also comments within the ProxyConfig RFC that is currently out to actually include these as part of the networking APIs, which are basically considered stable at this point, and we shouldn't be touching them, especially because this would be altering kind of the gateway kind of resources. So the question I have is, what is the path for this from going from alpha to beta? Could it be more? Is there anything blocking this other than, say, better documentation or additional unit tests? Kind of given those limitations that we have right now.
So
Austin, go ahead.
from environment perspective, for 112, we schedule to have ProxyConfig as a CRD. So from the point of view of if after the API review, because first thing is in mesh config and ProxyConfig, we have very low bar to add APIs. I think for anything that we promote to beta, we need DOC to approve the API, as it is, because it's a responsibility that we need to support it for a very, very long term, and we cannot just take, things we added are experimental and automatically promote it without a proper API review. But if the decision is to keep it in ProxyConfig, and I'm okay with that, in 112 we have a vehicle and through the CRD, so we can do whatever is necessary to maintain it and to test it. Now, my concern, I put a note on the side, is forward client cert details interacts with another discussion in security and networking about how to set headers about security related properties. And again, we should have a consistent API review, consistent behavior. We cannot, do things differently, and we should treat it as an API that we want to support long term. But in the end, if the decision is to keep it as it is and not do anything, then we have the vehicle in 112. That's my take at least.
Is ProxyConfig API going to be beta in 112 though?
That's up to
Not
TOC to
necessarily,
decide.
right?
Not necessarily, but at least we'll have CRDs that will have some validation, and we will have some. We already had a review about which fields to kill and which fields to promote. Maybe alpha 2, maybe beta. That's a different decision, but at least it's moving forward, and it will have a proper CRD and some garbage removed.
Yeah. So Lynn, in my mind at least, if we are making the proxy config CRD, and since mesh config or proxy config, however you want to call it, have been in alpha for a long time, it will probably make sense to make it beta directly, since we are going to take the fields which we know we want and move it there, right? Like these are the fields that belong there. So at least that part should be beta. And then as we already have, like within a beta API, we do have some alpha fields. So going forward, when we add new fields, we might be able to follow that pattern.
To be proxy config mode that I'm happy. I think I agree with you. I mean, it's been around and stable for a very long time. It makes sense to move to beta. But if those particular fields belong in network, in gateway or in proxy config, it's still up to debate and needs to be resolved.
Oh, I'm not talking about these fields. I was talking about general proxy config.
Yeah.
All right. So now for this one, I think that debate can be had, which also Louis is mentioning, right? Where do this belong? Do they belong in a gateway class API? Do they belong in proxy config? Or do they belong somewhere else? What do you think, Louis? Since you mentioned gateway classes, we did discuss this when I was creating this API, but we never got a resolution. We still have network issues.
Yeah, for me, I think the gateway question definitely blocks going to stable, but I'm not sure how I feel about getting into beta. I kind of feel like this has been around for a while and is something we think users should be able to keep using, and it's going to proxy config, going to beta as it seems okay.
Yeah, my thoughts as well. I think,
Mhm.
you know, definitely not for stable. For beta, if you look at annotations, we had a lot of annotation. I mean, injection was one of the example, right? It was beta also. So it seems not fair that we would block this going to beta. It's been around for a long time. I know there are people actually using this even when I was at IBM. So definitely there are users very interested in this type of features.
Yeah.
For non-trusted proxy, I mean, and I agree. ProxyConfig is probably right because it's specific to the gateway, not gateway class, and so forth. The other one is the one that concerns me.
What's the concern?
Yeah.
The xfcc. So first of all, for JOTS, we are saying that the proper way to set elements of the from the authentication layer is using virtual service set headers or whatever it comes from the discussion. Whatever is the result for JOT, it should be consistent. And xfcc in particular is very hard to parse and is not really a very good API that we want to support long term because again, it has a syntax that it's very variable and so if we start extracting claims from certificate and trusting the certificate, probably we don't want this API in particular. Long term in particular.
I'm still not following. xfcc is a pretty stable API, no?
Well, we don't actually use it in anywhere. It's just parsed through. And the syntax is, it can have a different fields, included, not included. I mean, full certificate, not full certificate, and whatever. It's a pretty complicated config. It's not just pass it through. So security review and security and networking should review how we want to deal with claims from MTLS or from JOTS, and should have a consistent story. We cannot just take a header and mark it beta without proper review.
Maybe I'm still not understanding this problem correctly. Do any of you guys understand it?
Yeah, I do think what Cos was saying makes sense. The trusted hop stuff, I agree, is fine, but if
we can't hear you, John.
Yeah.
Or I can't.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Why? Can you explain that to me again, John?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Go ahead, John.
Like the client cert stuff and the JOT stuff, they're very similar. They're about putting authentication details into a header to do routing on or pass to the backend. So it seems a bit odd to have those in two different APIs, doing like very, very different APIs.
So xfcc is a pseudo standard for proxies, right? Or am I confusing this with some other header that I have read before?
No, this is an envoy specific header, and it's particularly bad if you want to do security decisions based on it. I mean, given the syntax and how difficult it is to parse correctly. It has quotes and certificates, and then you have either full certificate or. So I actually try to use it for different things, and it's a huge pain. Even if it wasn't a huge pain, the real use of this certificate is to make security decision based on the MTLS identity in the client. But we cannot do anything with it because there is nothing in Istio that will actually parse it and use it in RBAC.
So the users that I have had, those who want to use this feature, is where the application needs the client certificate, similar to how the application needs the client IP.
TCP will obviously never get it. It has to be HTTP because it's a header. And we also have this authentication info used in authorization. So just passing it to application, and I'm not sure if application really wants to have it in this format in particular.
Costing, which specific information you want to use in authorization? I thought we already have like some support of them, like the XFF header. We have a field called remote IP that is specifically supporting that one in authorization.
Yes, we do, and that's wonderful. That's for X404. xfcc is for the client certificate.
But I thought like the most common use case is principal and namespace, right? Which we have first-class supports, unless you are like thinking about supporting other fields in the client certificate.
That's exactly what I want to support, but they are not supported if you are in a gateway topology case. So if the MPLS is not terminated in the gateway directly, but you go to network topology, the information that we talk about, they are passed in this header, and nobody is parsing this header, and we ignore them basically. That's what I'm talking about. So we don't support our own API if you are in a network topology, in a gateway topology case.
I see. So you are thinking like the XFCC is carrying some client certificates that is not the direct peer of the gateway, right? So that we cannot actually currently like enforce some OC on the XFCC header, right?
Yeah. That's the header delegation. We have MTLS terminated in the front end, and then the information is passed somehow to Istio, and Istio would somehow use it in its own API and treat it as. It's a pretty complicated problem, and I want to make sure we have an understanding of how we are going to solve it before we promote an API to beta. That's my point.
I mean, I get your use case, but I feel like those are two separate things. This is just passing along like XFF. It passes along like attestation that these are the client certificates I have seen. I don't know if you want to make what kind of choices you want to make, right? This is basically mostly for application consumption. If you want, your proxy can also make decisions based on it. But this field right now just tells you whether you are forwarding, whether you are sanitizing, or whether you are appending, right? So it feels like that should still be orthogonal to the decision you're going to make, right? If at all you want to make based on this.
How about a document with what is the content of xfcc, how it is used, because if it was added to as an alpha as an experiment and it was never reviewed properly. I think the fact that nobody really knows what it's inside, it's probably if we want to promote it to beta, it's a red flag.
Sorry, what do you mean no one's using it? I have one of the biggest customers who uses it. Sorry, I mean.
No. I mean from this group. I mean we don't seem to even know that it's not using authorization.
Yeah, so I think my comment earlier was around the IP address, which is the X forwarded for header. I think that is really clear as far as the instruction and how users are going to use it. The X forwarded client cert, I do think it would be nice if we can have a little bit more guide on how this could be used, because the documentation right now essentially only teaches you how you could potentially enable it and what are the options you could do to enable this, but it's like in a guidance of as a user, what am I going to do with this information? I think Neeraj, you are more indicate as the application developer for the service owner. Now this is the additional information they can potentially leverage and pass through their application. I think it would be nice to provide that level of detail.
Absolutely.
And if we have a little bit of steps, like the first one, XFF, then, you know, there's automation around it too.
Yeah, so I think that's a fair point. We can beef up the documentation. So that's a feedback, I guess, Jacob, for you, right? We can make sure. I think currently this points to Envoy documentation, but like I think when Costin was saying, sometimes the Envoy documentation is more confusing. So that's definitely doable.
So, Costin, would that work for you?
Yes, and also, you know, what I was mentioning, if the gateway topology terminates MTLS in a proxy in front of Istio, I want to make sure the Istio APIs are respected in that topology. So clients that credentials are part of RBAC and are not misbehaving.
So would that termination impact this header also?
Yeah, that's how the termination would use. I mean, that's what you do. The first front end terminates MTLS and then it's passing this header, but we just pass it through without applying it in RBAC. So if you have an RBAC saying that MTLS client principal must be X, we don't see it because it's a header that we ignore basically.
Okay, yeah, so that's interesting. So these are the additional scenario in conjunction of your gateway configuration, whether it's pass through or terminate.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, those are valid to add as later on we can say, okay, this is how you do these things in authorization. I think currently what's allowed is you can do per hop validation, as far as I can see. So at the gateway, you can configure authorization policies, which will say only allow traffic for these principals. And then at the service level, you can say, I only want to be contacted by ingress gateway principal, right? That's how you will have authorization. You can't right now configure that I want to be contacted by only this client identity at the service, which is derived from MTLS. That's what Costin, you are saying, right?
Yes. So the use case of MTLS termination in the first gateway is not properly, you know, it's not complete basically, and we don't have all the steps, and it's not working mostly for important use cases like this.
Is this a known gap on the security authorization policy side?
Support for MTLS delegation, yeah, it's not supported, and there are different efforts to have it working.
I mean, is it on the roadmap to solve this?
I think that would be a new feature request, right? Because the xfcc header, it was originally implemented for like only using the user application. Like actually, we have like several GitHub issues filed by customers asking that they prefer to use that header in the application. That's why we added this in the first place. But for use that in OC, that would be a new feature request.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like our end user JOT validation, right? It's end user client cert validation. So yes, it should be an equivalent feature to that. Okay, it sounds like a gap there, although we want that to block getting this to beta.
Not the entire feature. I mean, just the MTLS authentication part. That's the one I'm discussing.
So
I don't know if you want to.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was gonna say, I don't know if you want to block it because this is the feature that we just talked about for the first time. I think, again, like I'm saying, there are two different things. This field just tells you whether you want to set or append or you want to sanitize. I think the authorization bits can come on later via CRDs. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it should go in the existing authorization policy.
Exactly.
I agree. The fact that we forward this along, I mean, it's just like forwarding any other credential. right? Like if we're just forwarding it, then it's up to the application to deal with it. We don't deal with it. But that's probably fine for beta and fine for this policy in general. But yeah, we should add a feature request on authorization policy to allow authorization based on the forwarded client service.
Exactly.
All right, I'm happy with that.
And beefing up the documentation, as Costin and Lynn mentioned, that's a totally valid request.
Yeah. So yes, we should put something in the documentation about what this means and how you should use it as a user.
Then can we just at least get a doc with some examples, because I don't know if everyone looked at the xfcc header or tried to use it. I mean, write a small application to use it and see how it works, and then we can have a more informed discussion, I think.
I'm sorry. I mean, Jacob or I will, or whoever is responsible will update the documentation. You should look at that PR and keep adding to that PR and saying that you need more information. That's the right way of doing it.
So yeah, I think it's fine to say we should have more examples of exported client server.
Absolutely.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So let's add that as a request, Jacob, for promotion.
Okay.
To beef up that doc, but otherwise it looks pretty good.
Okay. So yeah, so just to clarify then, is this going to be this will be waiting on ProxyConfig or mesh config CRDs, or this can happen if, like, say that doesn't actually get through?
So the schedule is for ProxyConfig to have CRD in 112.
Okay.
Not mesh config, by the way. Mesh config, it's not on the any schedule, I know.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, so we'll get, all right. That sounds good to me then.
Yeah, and I think if for some reason the ProxyConfig it isn't going to make it in 112, then let's have another discussion in TOC, but let's assume that's going to make it.
Yeah, that's fair.
So can you config the forward client cert detail also in ProxyConfig?
Yes, both of them
Okay.
part of the gateway topology type, which is inside ProxyConfig.
Okay, yeah, got it. It wasn't super clear from the doc. Thanks.
Maybe Louis can talk now.
Maybe.
All right. Do you want to chime in before we move on to the next topic, Louis?
I literally went to restart my cable modem, so I don't know what you guys are talking about for the last 7 or 8 minutes.
Okay. I think the summary is basically we're talking about the gateway topology field, which is part of ProxyConfig. The XFF X forwarded for header, which is configured via num topology or number of hops. That seems useful and clear. Many people are using it. The xfcc side of house, where at the gateways you decide you want to sanitize, you want to set, you want to append. That's little unclear in terms of how users can use it and what's the benefit. So that was one request, to make sure we add more examples and clarify the documentation before we can mark them as beta. And the beta promotion is contingent on the fact that ProxyConfig, it's not contingent, but ProxyConfig itself, the CRD will be beta in 112, and if it's not, then probably we'll promote this independently.
Yeah, certainly we have to get ProxyConfig sorted out, I think. I agree with that. So I think it's appropriate to make it contingent.
Niraj, I have a question here. So if you set their gateway to be forwarding their or constructing their xfcc header and send it to the backend services, right? And are we able to configure their Envoy proxies on the workloads to also forward that to their backend application?
Yeah, so that's the default right now, I think.
Default
So
is forwarding. Okay.
Yeah, so the sidecar proxies will always append and forward the header
Okay.
to the application workload.
Do we
That's
have a
not
way?
configurable.
This is not configurable. Okay.
No.
I see. Yeah, I do agree that OTC policy based on their xfcc will be very, very important in the future if we want to promote it, because we can't rely on the backend to consume it. And also, we don't have flexibility to configure their services Envoy proxy to to decide what to do, right? Yeah. But I think it's okay to promote to beta, and since the default is forwarding, we can still rely on their users backend to consume it.
Correct.
Okay.
And to clarify, that implies that we require that any backend in front of an Istio gate or any proxy in front of Istio is supporting this header, and they will follow this. Because, so basically, we are adopting xfcc as a core API that we support, since it's part of the API.
Right. The only concern here is SFCC is not well understood standard. There might be misuse of it, right?
It's only Envoy that support it, so it's basically meaning
Right.
that this feature is only supported for Envoy in front of us.
Right. So itself is about security information, and it's not well understood standard. I think that's the risk here. Yeah. But I think beta is okay, might be, but not GA. If we want to go GA, we want to define their auth-z and allow users to define auth-z based on that, so that we can close the loop just on their Envoy proxy, not depend on the backend. Yeah.
Sure. I guess one question: should we update the security best practices to just make sure that people are at least aware of this, so that they don't, kind of make assumptions based on, like what they believe this field could be, or should the documentation updates be sufficient?
We can add a small section to talk about this, yes, but yeah, we need more. I guess we just need to refer to their Envoy documentation or our documentation, which one is better, like very clear to point out, here's how you should consume it, right? To prevent users misusing it.
Since this is already promoted, how do we want to follow up on feedback?
I'll just revert this and then I'll put up a new PR.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. That's the right thing to do. And we should see if we can have multiple people approve those enhancements.
We do for APIs, so we should be able to for enhancements.
Okay, thanks.
Can we move on to the last topic? Shweta, I think you're reminding us that we promised a strategy doc by the end of August.
Yes, so it's 2 weeks left, and I'm not even sure who would be providing me as one person. I know it's whole TOC, but I need one POC.
Sorry, what did you just say, Toyota?
Oh,
What?
I need one pager strategy document for Istio 2022 so that I can kick off the roadmap. I know TOC is supposed to do that, but I need one person who I can connect with, or I'm happy to connect with all of you, but since everyone is busy, if one of you can take the charge and make the job easier for me.
I'll take the charge.
Okay, so ETA is end of August for you then.
Well, let me rephrase that. I'm off from the 27th through the end of August, but I can lead it through then.
Okay.
If you start a talk, we can all pile on.
Yeah.
So why don't you start something in the next week, and then we'll jump on and make sure it gets finished up by the end of August.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. If you can start just with the theme first, like what would be the theme, and then the delay would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Louis, you had a topic, right? K8s1.22 and Istio 110. You did not finish.
Yes. So hopefully everybody's aware that Istio releases prior to 110 do not work with Kubernetes 122. And so we have an interesting kind of window alignment issue for support. John recently noted that on the supported versions page that we have actually tested 110 with 122. But yeah, we're going to be in this situation where we have an interesting support window gap. And it might just be a good idea to say that 110 is supported on 122 instead of being tested, but not officially supported, because it represents an interesting support cliff. And then there's a question about what we feel
Louis,
we would need to do.
Sorry. So 122 is the latest Kubernetes release, right?
Yes, it is the latest.
So normally the latest ends up working on the latest version of Istio. Is that not how we have seen, or we normally have two versions of Istio that support the latest Kubernetes?
So I mean, you're correct. The issue I think we're seeing is that certainly at Google, right, we're seeing 122 start to roll out into GKE's rapid channel. And so we had a support gap, right, where we had to tell users that they had to take 110, which at the time, or like before several days ago, was the only supported release that would work on a Kubernetes version. So it certainly created a bit of a headache for us. I was wondering if it was causing headaches for other people. And maybe it's just good enough to say that it's tested, but it's not supported, right? And we could just leave it at that. But I was wondering if other people were having issues.
So I thought there's a technical challenge to get it working, because they removed some of the API for the beta version, and 110 was using the beta version of the customer resource, so that it's not going to work.
110 does work.
It's
We made the changes. I mean, we knew they were coming, so we proactively made the changes before they broke us.
Okay, so 110 is also moved to not using the beta API.
Yeah,
so it's
we run
the
all of our
1.9,
CI tests
okay.
are running on 1.22 and 1.10. So
Okay, so 1.9 was the one. It's definitely not going to work if you move to 1.22.
Yes.
Okay, got you.
So Louis, what is your question or concern or suggestion?
So
That's a hard time understanding.
So right, we've already said that it's tested but not supported. We could say that it's supported, right? It's not strictly in policy, but it's an interesting challenge for users today, right, who are going to move to 122, right? Well, they can't, right? The challenge for us at Google was it was GKE's channels, right? Some channels would actually start to pick up 122, and they would pick it up, and the user wouldn't get an event or any control if they had installed open source Istio 1.9 or previously, and then they would just break. That was the thing that we were dealing with.
So is the suggestion that we start making things supported before the next, like if a Kubernetes comes out while an Istio is out, but the next Istio is not out, we try to make that Kubernetes supported on the previous version of Istio? So like in this case, Kubernetes 122 comes out, 111 is not out yet. We say, okay, 110 is supported on that. Is that the request, or?
So I think the request in this case is because 122 was a breaking cliff, right? Right. We can do what we've already done, right? Like there is already a solution out there. We can point users and say, look, it's tested but not supported, right?
Right. I'm wondering if we should make a stronger case and say, we'll always make sure at least one version of Istio works on a new version of Kubernetes.
Right. Yes. That we could introduce a new policy which says that if we can certify a new release before the next Istio release comes out, that we do that.
Yeah.
If we can't because it's incompatible.
So does that case ever exist? Because thinking deprecations and other things, I mean, Kubernetes has a deprecation period.
Well, they went through a long deprecation period with the changes they made in 122, but we only picked them up in 110. The fixes for it. So this case did actually happen.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, it happens every Kubernetes release.
So
that we don't officially support it until we release another Istio after.
Sorry, what I was saying is, should there ever be a case where we have an Istio version that doesn't support the latest Kubernetes version? It might not support all the new features, but it should at least run on that new version without stuff being removed and that sort of thing.
Right. I think that the assumption is it shouldn't take much work, but it's entirely possible that something happens in a Kubernetes version that we did not anticipate that breaks the previous Istio. It would be bad. Like maybe it's a problem on the Kubernetes side if that happens, honestly, but it is possible. So it's possible we would be signing up for additional work if we made this a policy. But I agree we should. I'm sorry, Niraj has his hand up too. Go ahead, Niraj.
Yeah, I think there are two things, right? Either we revise and create a smart policy that can handle this, which I think is a little trickier because if you look at 110, we already have 4 officially supported releases and then 3 additional releases which are tested. That means somebody has at least done the work for 7 Kubernetes releases, right? So I think the other thing that what Luis was trying to start was maybe saying in the beginning is it an exception case? I don't know if it is because we have tested it. So I want to understand what's the cost of tested but not supported and converting it from tested and supported. And, right. That will kind of tell us whether it's worth making an exception or we should just continue in this state.
Right, or whether we should adopt the policy change that Sven described, which is
yes,
we take the latest Istio release, and if there's a Kubernetes release between it and the next Istio release, then we try to support it.
It's confusing though, because then suppose 110 we have 3 patches out. So 110.3 will not support Kubernetes, then 110.4, right? So it's kind of confusing because then this page becomes misleading. You have to break it apart with patch versions. You get what I'm saying?
The Istio release could come out and we could just say it's the latest patch version that picks it up from that point forward.
Yeah.
It's not that confusing, I think. Right, that level of detail can go in release notes, right, with the patch.
And there still could be a problem there, I think, that Naresh was pointing out. Like, so let's say 110 came out, a user's on 110.1. If they go and upgrade Kubernetes without upgrading Istio, maybe it breaks because they didn't read the fine print that only 110.3 is supported on.
Yep.
Right. I mean, maybe we have to like look at how we represent the data.
Yeah.
Like maybe we caveat the patch release or something like that. So you get 122 in parenthesis 1.10.4, right? And then it's fairly clear. Right. But given that we're on a 3-month cycle and they're on a 4-month cycle, we will have one release where there's 2 months of drift, right?
How aggressive is this auto upgrade policy of GKE?
It's pretty aggressive. It's 1 month after the Kubernetes release, they will pick up that release in the Rapid channel.
Oh wow!
And then, yep. And
Is
that,
it
that, by the way, is not that different for EKS or AKS, by the way.
Is it automatically on the minor version though?
Yeah.
Like, oh
Yep.
wow.
EKS
Right.
used to
So
like
Kubernetes
that. I
doesn't
don't know
have major
now.
revision versions, right? Like they only have minor versions at this point.
Right, but like I know for IBM, we did like the 3rd digit auto upgrade, but not on 2nd digit, because 2nd digit is a much bigger decision. I mean, like even in Istio, right? We never automatically upgrade people on minor versions. It's always on the fixed version.
Sorry, what do you mean by fixed version? Right, we don't
like
do
the
TikTok.
third digit, 110.1, 110.2. So those are
Only the
automatically
patch.
upgraded,
Yeah.
but not
Oh, you mean the
on
patch,
from
the patch
110.2.
versions?
Yeah,
Yeah, the
Google
patch.
Google auto upgrades on the minor version of Kubernetes and Istio.
Okay,
Wow.
this is interesting.
Okay.
So let me ask a different question, Louis. This can't be just a problem for Istio, right? Other applications will be affected by this breaking change of Kubernetes.
Oh
and people
yeah,
must be...
I suspect M out of the N service mesh solutions in the market are scrambling right now to figure out why their customers are broken when they get upgraded. If they copied what we did or didn't copy what we did. So I'm sure there's some wailing and gnashing of teeth going on elsewhere. I suspect we were ahead of the curve and we were still late, right, by several months on the deprecation policy. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, the main reason that it hit us is because of the fact that we have 7 versions up there and we delayed dropping 1.15. So I think there's a lot of products out there that don't support 8 versions of Kubernetes at once. There's also a lot in our situation, like Nginx and Grist, like they don't have 1.22 support, for example, as well as many other Ngrist controllers. So we're far from the only ones.
Right. So I mean, it doesn't sound like anyone else has a burning need yet. Although, if you're running managed Istio products on auto-upgraded versions of cloud platforms providers of Kubernetes, you're going to have some fun in the next quarter. So you should be very cognizant of this. Because yes, they do pick up, like GKE, AKS, and EKS, they all pick up a minor revision pretty quickly. And if they have channels, which they all mostly seem to do, they will auto-upgrade their customers.
So I need to run.
Yeah, me too.
Should we pick this up? Let's carry this over to next week.
Or in Slack. We can keep talking about it in Slack.
And/or on Slack. Okay, sounds good.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Talk to you folks later. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, bye.